he's going to tell us a little bit more about the Apprentice of Peace Youth Organization. So I'll hand it over, Pos.
I'm gonna do my best to try to follow up on that, all of the information and work that Keeney just did. Thank you for that. The Apprentice of Peace Youth Organization, it was started by my partner Ronnie and I in the park. We started doing wellness and having sessions, Tai Chi sessions and different wellness sessions in the park, along with doing African drumming, and the community just was coming out, and it, kids started coming out, and we were like, wow, like they really was taking to the Tai Chi and some of the stuff that we were doing. And both my partner and I, we both went through a 5-year medical Qigong training. So in essence, we're like Chinese doctors, if you will. And then we were practicing with 2 master Tai Chi instructors as well. And ultimately incorporated those principles, some of those practices and principles and things into our program. So the Apprentice of Peace, we incorporate principles of Tai Chi into our programming, along with some of the principles from the book that we put out. And we provide programming for students, families, and community. If you go to the next slide, please. This is a copy of the book, or image of the book, and it's called The Apprentice of Peace and Uncommon Dialogue. And one of the first questions in there that we talk with students about is, how do you believe in yourself when it doesn't show in your actions? Because being an apprentice of peace is really about being your best self, mentally, physically, spiritually, and energetically. The 3 principles that we use to kind of facilitate conversation and workshop with focuses on what we call the RCA, which is realizations. So we have a round of realizations, kind of basically aha moments, things that have happened or occurred that, cause us to have that spark, or, generate that understanding. And we talk about those things and what led to it, what happened, and whether it was something intentional or something happened, or, however it occurred. And then committing our effort to that realization, or to whatever our realization is about, in terms of being our best self, and then accepting all of the hard work that it takes to do that, and be our best self, and continue consistently commit our effort, right? And which means sometimes we got to give up some things. Sometimes we don't get to do some of the things that everybody else does, and all of that type of stuff. So we really talk about those things, and then we create basically what we call a 9-point philosophy, which is the RCA GPS, which stands for goal, plan, and strategy, and getting them to think about creating goals and plans and strategy around being their best self, and then how that looks for themselves, the community, and the world. Our mission is to engage, students through a whole person approach, which for us, whole person approach is leadership, identity, and community. And it's really about, meeting students where they're at, striving to create, a level of support and platform that allows them to really partner with us as the adults. Because, and it's straight out of the students' mouth, like a lot of times, people say youth adult partnership, or they're working with, students, but that's not really the case. It's the adults basically telling them what they're going to do or how they're going to do things. And I think it's, super important to be able to allow for them to be able to make certain decisions, or be a part of decision making, and making suggestions, and those types of things. If we go to the next slide, please. So what is Tai Chi? It's a ancient martial art and wellness system that consists of slow movements and forms. And for most, it's considered to be like a moving meditation, very somewhat similar to yoga in a sense. While yoga is more static, the Tai Chi is definitely more moving. And it's the application of yin and yang principles, or balancing energies. So we talk about, balance a lot, and our energy, and how to balance our energies. For example, with young people, and people in general, right? We can easily get upset, get angry, and really get very high on the emotional scale. So it's like, okay, what's the balance? Then, the balance is asking questions and kind of, encouraging people to calm down and take a breath, to talk about what's going on, as opposed to meeting them where they are, which we know is ultimately going to create conflict, increase the conflict or cause more conflict. So, we talk about that and really striving to understand energy in that sense and how to balance energy in those types of situations, because conflict management and resolution is a huge piece, especially for youth and even for adults, is a huge issue in and of itself. So, trying to understand how to diffuse that, and, especially when we're talking about youth violence and those types of things. And, the name Tai Chi itself just means perfect balance and harmony. That's what it means. And so those are kind of the principles and things that we get to talk about. And it's not just talking about it, they're actually getting to do it, which I think is a huge part of it as well, too, because then they actually feel it in their body and can say, oh, and a lot of times they say, man, I never felt that before, because they're not truly aware or conscious, I think, of breath, and the impact of breath and movement and those types of things, which, exercise just makes us feel good, period. If we go to the next slide, and so pretty much our programs, we started off with our flagship program, which was Tai Chi for Peace. And it was really about the principles in the book, having what we call courageous or brave conversations, and then having the movement as a part of that. And like I said, in those conversations, a lot of things were coming up. A lot of things were coming up because we were having intentional conversations, again, around being the best self, what's happening in their life, what, different sorts of things. And, suicide would come up, suicidal thoughts, or, different things like that, mental health concerns. We had a lot of students that, when the DACA thing was a huge deal, that was a huge issue as well, where a lot of students, felt a certain way about that, and wasn't coming to school, and just a lot of different things that came up, and just kind of made us be more intentional about how we were facilitating the program and some of the things that we were doing. And so we started doing more enrichment programs, and infusing mental health awareness, if you will, in it, through comic book creation, through lyrical expression, which is poetry and spoken word, those types of things, fashion design. And then we had youth advisory councils as well. And we've since kind of remodeled our youth advisory council, but what they were doing is they have a campaign called the Value of Life campaign, where they were sharing mental health messages and awareness and positive messages around reducing mental health stigma. And they were creating these messages on apparel, which we then had fashion shows that allowed us to bring in groups of people to talk about the real issue. So the fashion just kind of got them there, but then they would lead the conversation and talk about what was going on, different support that was needed, and just what was kind of going on, especially as related to the youth violence. Because for those of you who are familiar or not familiar, in the Denver area, there's definitely been a slew of violence that has been going on. I mean, really nonstop. But definitely, I mean, just within the last few months, we've had several school shootings, multiple shootings where multiple people or students were, shot or hurt. Like it is really an ongoing, thing. And even with the last school shooting, there was a school, with the school shooting, or not the last one, but one of the more recent ones, and probably nationally known ones, with the Aurora ones, where there was a shooting, and then a couple of days later where they were trying to do a healing march, and there was another shooting, like literally at the school right after that, or another school. So there's a lot of violence, a lot of things that have been going on amidst the youth during this time. But we've again separated out our youth council more so by age group, and that's based on some of the discussions that we've been having with the students, to where now we're working specifically with middle school, high school, young adults, and then we have mentors who we're working with as well. And then for our enrichment programs, the littles or elementary school students will be kind of starting in that Tai Chi for Peace place. And then we have career pathways, because that is definitely something that, from a connected standpoint, that the students just aren't connected to for some reason. And it's really sad, because I know adults who talk about not being connected to those resources and having to struggle to figure it out, and yet we still have students in the same place at this very moment, who are struggling with that same thing. And it just baffles me. And
I've had conversations with school administrators before about all of our students are going to college, and I'm like, whoa, I highly doubt that, but whatever floats your boat. And so just really fighting for the students in that space and trying to provide them with opportunities and experiences to figure out what they really want to do, and then mentors to support the work. So that's I think really where we at. Again, Colorado is definitely increasing in terms of the student suicide attempts and or consideration, and just the isolation that has kind of developed over the course of this pandemic. But like you said, I think you were saying a little bit of this, Keenan, about not being able to go to certain places being limited. Like, it is a really effect across the board, and maybe some things that we're not even thinking about or considering because we're not youth, so we're not thinking about it from that perspective, and we're adults, and it's like, oh well, this is good for us. We don't want to be around other people, and the kids are like, no, I want to be around everybody and my friends and all of the things. So very challenging, I think, space to be in right now, but even more so important why all of us are here, I think. And it's important work that we're doing, and important that we work together and communicate and share resources. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Pos. That's amazing work.